Good evening and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm your host, Eugene Chan. Our guest tonight is Dr. David Wong Yaga, an economist who has had extensive experience in business, industry, and policy research. He was with the US Federal Reserve Bank in the late 1980s, and then over the last 40 years here in Hong Kong, he has been a prominent leader in society. Most recently, he was the chairman of the MPF scheme, as well as the president of the Chinese Manufacturers Association of Hong Kong. David is currently the chairman of the Council of the Education University of Hong Kong. We have invited David here tonight to tell us how the National 14th Five-Year Plan is significant to Hong Kong. Welcome, David.
Hi, Eugene.
So last week, we had a visit from the central government officials to brief our government officials, lawmakers, community leaders on the National 14th Five-Year Plan and Hong Kong designated role. I believe this is the first time Hong Kong requested for national officials to brief the people of Hong Kong. Since you have been deeply involved with formulating public policy, especially in the economic affairs over the years, you are also a deputy of the National People's Congress. I think you're the best person to tell us what they said and what it all means to people of Hong Kong. Some of our viewers may not be very familiar with this plan, so can you tell us very briefly what it is and how it is different to the previous five-year plans?
Sure. Well, the five-year plans, they are actually very, very significant because they really set the direction, the priorities, and the resource allocation for the development of the country for the next 5 years. So this is really a very massive exercise, and you really want to get this right and also have it executed very effectively as well. So this is a very big deal. But I think that the 14th Five-Year Plan is actually even more important than many of the other five-year plans in the past.
You mean for Hong Kong or for the whole nation?
Really for the whole nation, and also for Hong Kong by implication as well. And that's because China is really at a very, very critical juncture at the moment in this development. Part of that is that China is already a middle-income country, having attained a GDP per capita of about $10,000 US. But more importantly, because of the rising US-China tensions, the whole international landscape for China's development has changed very dramatically as well. So that makes actually this plan even more important for China to get it right, and especially to realize some of its priorities, especially in the area of technology and also structural reform as well. So that's why this plan is even more significant than the rest.
Well, David, I'm sure before we go into details, I'm sure it's going to be very comprehensive, looking at different areas of the nation, including Hong Kong. But what is the key development strategy behind the plan?
I think that one of them is that this plan takes a very holistic or systemic approach to development, namely the three very important pieces: security, technology, and industry, particularly manufacturing. They are the key pieces, and they are all very closely related. And that's because from the experience of the last couple of years, China realizes that security, and they mean that not just in the very narrow sense of national security, but also the whole supply chain security and the economic security is really under threat unless China develops more of its own indigenous technology. Semiconductors being a very, very good example of that.
We heard of that, yes.
So you need to develop your own technology in order to secure your security, and you're not developing the technology just for technology's sake as well. They also emphasize the application of that technology to industry, particularly manufacturing, so that China can remain a leader in key industry areas, in the global economy. So in that sense, it really places security, technology, and industry all as a very important whole development strategy.
So David, then, I mean, we all heard what you said, but what is the role of Hong Kong in this plan? Because Mr. Wong Lauchen, the Deputy Director of the Hong Kong Macau's office, said that Hong Kong has a very special status and function in the opening of China's economy to the world, and our role is not replaceable. Why are we so important? Can you explain what he was referring to?
Actually, there are many reasons for that, but to look at it very directly, we know that going forward, as we mentioned, technology is going to be extremely important, and actually Hong Kong is very well placed to help the country develop in that direction. Mm-hmm. One reason is that we have 5 universities who are ranked among the top 100 in the world, mm-hmm. according to the QS rankings. So, and they are very good at science and technology and engineering. So that already you can see that Hong Kong has a tremendous role to play. Mm-hmm. Another one is, of course, in the capital markets, because to develop, you always need to raise capital, tapping the international capital. Mm-hmm. And of course, Hong Kong is naturally placed, being a international financial center. So already, we see some very, very important areas where Hong Kong can play an important role.
Right, David. I mean, in the past, I'm sure we heard from the news and the commentary saying that Hong Kong hasn't really been integrated well with the mainland. So, with this role that Hong Kong has been tasked with, do you think we have what it takes to fulfill that role? Because in the past, they've always wanted to be a financial center, and there are more roles for us to be taken on this time. Do you think we have what it takes?
I think that we have all the important ingredients, to make this happen. Okay, but I think that we need to work a little bit harder mm-hmm. on having really the political will, right? To make this happen as well, right. And also really for the whole society, including both our government and mm-hmm. also the population, mm-hmm. To learn more about China's development, so that we can meaningfully mm-hmm. participate mm-hmm. in the whole process. Mm-hmm. And a lot of our important advantages are due to the one country, two systems. Right. I can just give one very simple illustration right. why we are irreplaceable as an international financial center for mm-hmm. the country. And that is because Hong Kong has 3 attributes that are very unique. The combination of that, unique to Hong Kong, and you will not find the same combination in New York, London, Shanghai, or Beijing. Mm-hmm. And namely, they are the following. 1, Hong Kong is perfectly integrated with the global capital market. Okay. Secondly, under one country, two systems, we have a natural firewall between Hong Kong and the financial markets of the mainland. And number 3 is that we are totally transparent to the regulatory authorities in Beijing as well. Mm-hmm. So the combination of those 3 are unique to Hong Kong, and you would not be able to find it anywhere right. else. And that's due to the one country, two systems right. setup.
But David, there's another comment I heard during the seminar. They said that if we can't do things in a timely manner, even if we complete the job, we are not seen to be doing things effectively. This is quite a strong comment, saying that we're not pushing it. You mentioned about the willpower of our government and the leaders. Do you think we'll be able to pull our socks up this time?
Well, I certainly hope so, and I think that we are well positioned to do that for the following reasons. In the past, we did have some opposition who likes to, drag their feet and mm-hmm. also, to obstruct mm-hmm. The implementation of government policy. Mm-hmm. I think that a lot of that is gone right now. I think that we have a much more unified administration along with LegCo. Mm-hmm. I think that we can get things done, right. And I think that the whole sense of priority for the society has also shifted. Right. We know that we have to catch up mm-hmm. with the economy and also improving the people's livelihood.
Right. I mean, as you said earlier, I think we need Hong Kong people to be more aligned, which we'll talk about later in the show. Do you have much expectation from the upcoming policy address by the Chief Executive in October? Because what the 14th five-year plan had given us directions, but how we do it effectively hasn't been laid out. So do you expect much from the Chief Executive?
Well, I certainly hope to see strong initiatives in the forthcoming policy address. And in fact, I made that clear to the Chief Executive when she met with some of the NPC deputies
Yes.
A few weeks ago. And I mentioned that even though this is the last policy address of this particular administration, I think that people have very high hopes
Yes.
For two reasons. One is that we're just coming out of a period of turmoil and reform. And so I think that we are now very well positioned, to actually get things done. And secondly, as the central authorities, spokesmen have said, we've been dragging our feet for too long
Yes.
for various reasons.
Right.
So there's really no further time to lose.
Right.
I mean, we cannot afford to wait another year.
Yep. David, we will go to a break very soon, but before the break, I want to ask you a question. I'm sure many of the viewers will be concerned because it has been stressed over and over again. National security is of paramount importance. We have seen what has happened in Hong Kong, especially if we're going to be an international financial hub. However, the sanctions from the US and the possibility of the anti-sanctions from the central government really have the potential of throwing Hong Kong financial markets into turmoil. I'll use that term, turmoil. How do you think Hong Kong can navigate through these challenges? What would you say to that?
Well, I would just say that, it's going to be very tricky to navigate these very uncertain times. But I think that we will do well in Hong Kong to really stick to the principle of one country, two systems. And that means that, we have to do everything in accordance with the constitutional order. And also we have this obligation to uphold the national security. At the same time, we must make very full advantage of what the two systems can offer us in terms of being very flexible and being very open and also retaining our international character.
Right. David, I mean, another issue I'm sure the viewers will want to know that the central government always wants us to reinforce our status as an international legal and dispute resolution services center. But the Western media has continued to cast doubt on whether Hong Kong's rule of law is being upheld. As a deputy to the NPC, how can we be more proactive in communicating this effectively to the rest of the world?
Well, I think that the best proof is really with the passage of time.
Right.
I think that our legal system, is still holding up, in a very sound way. And I think that, with the passage of time, people would all come to realize that. I think that in the meantime, we must, keep up the effort to explain to the international community as to why some of the recent legislations that were put in place have been necessary to maintain the social order and also to actually strengthen the rule of law in Hong Kong. And I'm very hopeful that with the passage of time that we will be proven right.
So you're confident we'll be fine?
I am confident because I know that our foundation of the rule of law has not been shaken.
Okay. David, maybe we'll look at the effect on this 14th five-year plan on Hong Kong's unique position. As you know, Hong Kong has always been known as the gateway to China, and obviously we want to maintain our unique position. But in my reading, I'm just going to read to you, one of the key strategies in this plan seems to be the dual circulation strategy, which appears to focus on nation's domestic market. How can we do that at the same time while maintaining as an international center? Can you explain this term very briefly to our viewers and what it means for Hong Kong, and how do we adopt this?
Well, the anchor of the dual circulation strategy is on the domestic circulation, the internal one.
Right.
And I think it's very natural because China has a very big market, 1.4 billion people, and the middle class of consumers are, set to double, in the next few years out to the next decade. So, I think the emphasis on the domestic circulation is very natural. But even there, I think that Hong Kong has a very natural role to play in terms of, because we have a lot of international experience as to manufacturing and trade and all that we can continue to expand, along our strengths domestically. But also the dual circulation, there's a very important aspect of that is the external or the international circulation as well.
Okay.
And so Hong Kong being the biggest, offshore RMB settlement and the center, and also being the most important platform for investment, foreign investment going into China, and also the other way around for China's outbound investment. I think that our role is going to be even more important in the coming years.
Thank you for very reassuring words. I'm sure you're the best person to answer this question I'm going to ask you. Being an economist, work in the US, you have always been embracing a laissez-faire type of economy, minimal market intervention. But with the 14th five-year plan with Hong Kong's role, is more or less a planned economy. Is this going to affect Hong Kong's position? Because we are rated as one of the freest economies in the world.
Well, actually, I think that's kind of a misconception. I think that having the 14th five-year plan doesn't really make China as a whole a planned economy. And the important thing is that both capitalist systems and also socialist system, they can rely on the market mechanism. And I think that one country, two systems is very clear on this point, that the mainland is socialist, but Hong Kong should continue to develop its capitalist system. I don't see any contradiction in that. But really for Hong Kong itself to move forward, I think that the stronger government initiative is very important anyway. If you look at, for example, all the key concerns of the Hong Kong people right now about land and housing, about healthcare, about education, about the retirement schemes and all that. All of those things, actually, government has a very major role to play, whether you have a planned economy or a completely open market economy. So I don't think that there's any contradiction in that. In particular, I think that for us to really leverage on the growth opportunities on the mainland, we do need more G2G coordination as well. Finance is a very good example. The X shares, and also the Shanghai, Hong Kong Stock Connect, and so on and so forth. All of those things could not have come about without government-to-government coordination. And that's where the Hong Kong government must put in a stronger effort as well.
Right. Another view that we often hear is that by integrating more with the mainland, we will become just another city in China. How would you say to that?
Well, I completely disagree with that because I think that our strengths are really derived from one country, two systems. And of course, only two places really enjoy that, Hong Kong being one, the other is Macau. So I think that, we have a very, very unique role, a very important role in China's continued development. And I think that it will stay that way, for, well, at least the next decade and beyond.
David, I'm going to ask you another question. You seem to have good answers to all my questions. Is that COVID has been around, for 18 months now, and travel restrictions obviously been very challenging for all of us in Hong Kong. And now we're kind of in a dilemma because we really want to open up internationally, but yet we have to maintain a zero COVID policy so that the mainland will open to us. Would you like to comment on that?
I think that COVID is a very long-term business that we have to deal with. It's been 18 months, but this thing, is likely to go on for another 2 or 3 years, or maybe even longer. So somehow, I think that we have to find a new way of living with the disease. That maybe it's not realistic for us to always want to drive to zero cases, but of course, we don't also want to have a big outbreak or anything like that. So there has to be some middle ground, and I think that the government, is starting to realize this reality as well.
So David, maybe in the last part of the show, I want to ask you more about how Hong Kong people can be engaging in this new policy, because if you want to be successful, you want everybody engagement. But if you ask around, not many of the average Hong Kongers on the street would be conversing with this. How would you propose to engage this better?
Well, I think that we have to make a stronger effort as well in terms of the educating the public. And I would just give one very simple example. People think that this is all about business and the economy and all that. Well, first of all, the economy really concerns everybody. But even beyond that, the 14th five-year plan calls for Hong Kong to develop as a center for art and cultural exchange with the rest of the world. So there's a big role for people who are involved in the arts and the culture and all that. People who ordinarily wouldn't think much about economic integration with China being a very top priority for them. So that's a perfect illustration.
So maybe we'll look forward to the policy address, and hopefully the chief executive, as you said, art and culture, hopefully we have more concrete policies.
And I just hope that the policy address would play up Hong Kong being this very important international crossroads, this role it plays as well.
David, since you are the deputy to the National People's Congress, I'm sure you would realize that some of our population are still very resistant to mainland's values and systems. How do we overcome that in short?
Well, I think that we have two very different systems, and I think that it's important to recognize that there are differences, and I think that to respect the differences and to accommodate the differences to the best we can. I think it's perfectly okay that we do have two systems. I mean that's the whole setup of it. I think that we can live very happily, for mutual, based on mutual respect as well.
And the last question I'm going to for the viewers are. We heard of presidency in the 2017 the chief executive inaugural address saying that we don't want us to miss the boat. And Mr. Wong recently has reminded us not to miss the boat again. What will happen to Hong Kong if we do miss the boat?
Well, I'm sure that actually I'm very hopeful that that won't happen.
Right.
But of course, I think that we've wasted, if not 1 decade, then perhaps 2 decades.
Yes.
And no, we don't have any further time to lose. But I'm sure that we can pull together as a community this time around.
Yeah. So you don't think we can go on as we did before previously? Things are going to be fine. Hong Kong is the greatest place on earth. Everything's going to work out fine.
Well, I think that the outlook actually remains bright. I don't think I'm being overly optimistic about that. And I think that we are better positioned than probably since the return to China in the 1997. I don't think that we've ever been in a better position to move forward.
Okay. Thank you, David, for explaining such an important policy in a clear manner to our viewers. And I'm sure we will not want to miss the boat, as you said. In fact, we will want to sail with the wind. Thank you all for watching, and have a good week and good night.